because I uninstalled the extension, so my page is now back to the original tab. So, that's kind of, I'm allowed to say that, right?
Good morning, everyone. Groups of 10, 15 and 20 people, they got workshops from experienced professionals with subjects like Visual Studio Codes, JSON, Power BI, PowerShell. You can see it on the slide. Gave praise to the teachers and the quality of the workshops. Percentages under each bottle. I will show you what's on the back. So that's how we came up with the design. Crazy about NAV or zot van NAV. I think that's what we are, all people here. If you see your country coming on, feel free to cheer or make some noise. Let's have a look. Now let's look at the big six, the top 6 represented countries. So we ordered it for you. You see, in the end, the Germans always win. That's 1,236 participants this year. That's 200 more than we had last year.
Normally, there's a lot of slides, and somebody told me at some point, for those who need to leave early, get the key message in first. So that's exactly what we're going to do. When can you get it? So here's the roadmap, right? So we start with that. That's normally marketing folks always end with this one, right? But we start with it because then that's taken care of and we can get to the tech stuff, right? So we want to have one code base, one product, one code line, no differences. And we will achieve that at the fall of 2018 with Dynamics 365 Tenerife. So there's no difference here. It's still the same product. When this is coming and the countries it's coming in. So as I said before, availability December 1st for the NAV 2018, and the Tenerife version, Dynamics 365 Tenerife, will be available in these 14 countries as well as the W1 version. Then people start asking, what about Norway? What about other countries? This is not the complete list of countries. This is the countries we're going to do in spring. Our beloved product, supporting only a limited set of functionality. What we're doing with the Tenerife product is we're bringing the full NAV into the cloud. So it's going to look something like this, where you have the full product in there. As you can see, this product, of course, communicates with the Office 365 family of products, like, for instance, a PayPal app or other apps that by themselves just attribute additional functionality on top of the product itself. Family here, you can do Power Apps, you can do Power BI, you can use the Business API, which will also be covered later in the keynote. You can interact together with the product. And also, shortly, this thing will be released, which is the Business Suite, the Accountant Hub, which essentially is a product that allows you to aggregate a lot of installations of Dynamics 365. It will go in and peek and get key values, key figures out, things that's working together. What really, fascinates me about the thing is the uptake of other technology, both from Microsoft but also third-party technology. A little bit our time thinking about, CDS here. So CDS is a common data service. Last year at Tech Days, we had a section called the data strategy. I'm going to repeat a little bit here because it's important to try to understand what CDS is. You got to get into this. This is something where I have no idea where this is going eventually. So definitely there's potential in there. It's find the hidden insights. And by that I mean, if a machine learning can take some data and look at it and tell you something of that data, even though you know the data and can see the data, but it can tell you something, a correlation in that data you didn't see yourself, at that point it becomes valuable. Machine learning now look at this data here and try to make correlation, find patterns essentially between the rows here. And quickly, it'll come up with 2 patterns. It's figured out different models, so to speak. In the real world, it would suggest millions. That's what a computer is good at. It would try out millions of patterns, all matching the training data. And then eventually you reveal to the computer the missing info of the validation data to pick the model that actually had the best hit. 130 columns we have on sales order lines on the Dynamics 365 data set. Now it's impossible for humans to do this accurately, but that's exactly what machine learning is all about. And it's based on both the data you have in your order book moving forward, but also the historic data. So looking back, what did I sell at the same time last year? How much did people order? And you can start adding in how was the weather that day. You in details, basically pick up the data and send this to Azure Machine Learning and end up calling this a time series management.forecast method for machines. But now you have all these services running in there. And the one we've been talking about right now is this one, machine learning. But there's a ton of them in there. And this list next year will be twice as big. Well, maybe not twice as big, but it'll be bigger. LinkedIn information you also get. You see, you broaden not your data set, but you broaden your graph of data. And then let's take all your data, all the partner solution data in there, and then stick all that in, and this is what it's all about. That's why we need the big data. That's why we need to move into the cloud to be able to, put all these features on top of what we got today.
To add more virtual machines, and you will have to duplicate everything, all the services, which is not an optimal use of your resources in Azure. So instead, what you do is that you break out your application into microservices, and you deploy these microservices in a set of virtual machines arranged in a cluster. And we have the active tenants, which are actually the databases used by the service. And we have the application database, which are shared typically across the cluster, deployed on a shared database. So this technology is not available on-prem, but yet, at least. But this is also something we can do in the cloud. So this is cloud only. So Azure database, you choose its size with a unit which is called DTU, which stands for Database Transaction Unit. This is the Dynamics 365 Tenerife in the cloud. This is how it looks like. This is how a cluster looks like. So one of the things we spend a lot of time on is trying to optimize the cost of our resources, of course, because we also have to pay for our Azure consumption. We have a standard 200 EDTU pool. The application database are S2 or S1, and we have a cap of 20 EDTU per tenant database. We'll be deploying, you saw the slides from that Thomas showed before, and we're going to deploy in other countries. We're going to Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, East Asia, and they get propagated through the monitoring service here, and they go into Cosmos. Cosmos is our big data technology. Here is a list of this is the real thing. So there's all the incidents that we have currently. You can see all of them are either resolved or mitigated. And if I click on one incident, I already get some of the data. So this is all generated by our monitoring and our telemetry, and we put that into this tool. So we get some data of when this has been detected, which region it is in, and things like that.
Of our product moving forward, I don't hope anybody has missed that point. The in-client designer allows you to go and create a full-fledged extension without even touching VS Code or without writing any code and so forth. It allows you to do visually do the changes. You can try it on multiple display targets. NAV in the cloud, or Dynamics 365 Tenerife. Still allowed to say NAV, but I'll learn it in a year. So up here in the corner, I have my designer mode. And basically I can go into design mode on any page. I can design 10 pages at the same time. And when I count done, that will be turned into an extension. By the way, so I can still do all the actions and stuff. There's no limit to what I can do. I'm just doing designing on top of this. let's say I don't like the block feature, so I'll go here. You see this small triangle that allows you to pick up this field, move it elsewhere, or you can click on the triangle to get options. And it's in the data set, it exists, it's just not shown on this page, but I want to bring it in. I simply drag it onto the form and I want to put it here. So now I have the name too. Interesting enough, it contains data, that's interesting. And at the same time, I don't like this general header here, so let me just change that to a single key. That's it. Extension objects. Those extension objects are compiled into a package. That package is deployed onto the system and installed for my tenant. Page extension 5100, that's the one I did before. We'll dig into that in a second. But under the .vs Code folder, there's a launch.json file. And that file contains the connection to the server. Launch JSON and put that into the project. So you're basically good to go at this point. I can, from this project, now connect to the server because the server told me how to do that. And if we look at the page extension itself, you'll see the code here. It's actually pretty simple. But first of all, notice that it's a page extension object. It's not a page object, it's an extension object. So this is a design mode on page 22, and at the same time, I can again navigate it around pages here. I can go in and I can see my changes are actually there. Let me just stop designing for a second and show you the changes here. If I try to go with the 2 characters, I get the error here. Right, so the 2 short shows up now. A red extension here, and they just added their field to the customer row. Whereas in extension 2.0, there will be a table for each extension, adding the foreign key to the customer, and then the red field and the blue extension will have the blue field. When you do that, that means that you have a way during uninstall just to keep the companion table as your backup for all the data that particular extension added, which is great. Moving forward from storage into deploy. Earlier, when you upgraded the system, the upgrade code really didn't know whether it was a new installation, individual transaction breaks between the base, and then the individual extensions, if so want. And of course, there's also some upgrade trigger code that allows you to come in and write code during upgrade, which probably is necessary in some cases to do upgrade triggers if you need them. So that's kind of the big picture of extensions.
Can integrate with really a lot of other Microsoft technology, things like Office 365, obviously. We've always been good at integrating with Office 365 and Office in general, Power BI. That would most likely be what currently is displayed in a fact box. And maybe even replace the fact box altogether in the end. And this is our new customer card.
This year, the Docker technology and how we actually offer a ton of things on Docker today that you can go ahead and utilize. This is kind of a technical explanation, but typically when you run software, you don't want 2 software applications to override each other's memory. You get that by different processes. But what about, you don't want 2 software applications to override each other's settings, which are stored in the registry. You can start creating virtual machines, which is what typically is done. And then you end up with a picture like this on the left side here. So you have your own host operating system, the physical server, and then you have the hypervisor sitting on top of that, and then you generate virtual machines, and now clearly you have the necessary separation between your things. And that just starts up as a service, and now you have a Docker command you can call and thereby initiate new processes. In 16, you would already have half the image in your cache and only need to download the remaining part. I do have a cheat sheet, so to not do the typing, so I'll just open that one. And then I'll open a command prompt, because what I have here is just a plain normal command prompt. I already downloaded Docker. You go to www.docker.com, download Docker for Windows, that's it. It itself gets a C drive that comes from the image. It does not get anything from the host machine unless I choose to map it into the W1 version of NAV. And of course I can do the same thing here by opening up yet another browser. Do the this Docker stats with an S, and that will display the containers running. That's basically your how many virtual machines are running right now, or in this case, how many containers are running, and how much memory is used, and so forth. So you see, it's not like the virtual machines where I need to pre-allocate 4 or 8 or how many gigabytes of memory. This is kind of using the host operating system's memory dynamically, because
the translator here, the AI, doesn't have any context. But what you can do with Azure, in Azure services, you can use the big translator, which is the service behind this, and you can train it by fitting in some translation you have. So I've done that as an experiment. I took all the translation we have for Dynamics 365 and fit it to the service, and in the context of ERP and Dynamics 365. So, and here's how it looks like. So I did a little bit of coding. It seems like a little more exotic, like Japanese. So this is an example of how you can use AI. Over to you for the next things on cognitive services.
Right. Machine translation. If you only do it word by word, you end up getting rubbish. Right. If you start thinking about doing the context of the sentence and what does the sentence mean, and then you can start getting really nice machine translation out of this. So we all humans, mistakes happens, and think about a sentence like, I would like two Happy Meals with coffee and with ketchup, please. But I don't want ketchup in my coffee. How as humans, we know that, but that's the cognitive services part, where you know that ketchup and coffee doesn't fit together, but ketchup would fit together with a Happy Meal, and so forth. And have the machine build up the order as this guy is speaking. And he's changing his order. I would like 2 Happy Meal, one of them with something, and now it needs to split. It's pretty amazing. This is in real time. And that's pretty cool.
Good afternoon, welcome to McDonald's. May I take your order? Yes, I would like 2 Happy Meals, 1 cheeseburger and 1 chicken McNugget. Both with fries and apples, 1 with a chocolate milk and 1 with a small orange juice. Also give me 2 cheeseburgers, both of those no onion and 1 of those no ketchup as well. 1 fry and a large coffee, 2 cream, 3 sugars. Would you like that fries to be large? Yes, thank you. Would you like barbecue sauce with those nuggets? No, sweet and sour. Is the order on your screen correct? Yes. Okay, your total is $14.68. Please pull around the first window.
And this is done real time. This to me is, okay, well, it's gonna be equally fabulous. I'm a little bit worried about people from the UK. When you talk about artificial intelligence and do that search in the UK, you'll get this.
Hi, what do you expect for the next years to happen on the market?
I expect big changes. We see that already, that the whole landscape, the whole atmosphere is changing, that we are moving from a phase in which you could sort of get a new version of NAV and then implement it and relax to a phase of continuous learning. Like, you cannot sit back and lean back and implement what you know anymore. There will be constant upgrades, constant new integration scenarios like we have now with CRM, NAV in the cloud, that we have CDS, CRM. So I expect that to keep on at that pace.
Are you looking forward to it, or are you fearing it?
Absolutely, very much looking forward to it, because the market demands it. I mean, we've been looking for integration scenarios for such a long time, and now it's finally coming true. And I think there's big added value for the customer in that, and that also means that we as partners need to change and get into a mood of or into a mode of constant learning and focusing on the possibilities that come with new technologies and new business opportunities.
What piece of new technology within the last 1 or 2 years is your favorite one?
That's a good question. I mean, of course, this whole move to the cloud, to subscription-based business models, that is very appealing. But also, what's coming now, the CDS, CDM, which will enable an integration, an easy integration across platforms, which will actually at some stage get rid of the idea of separate platforms altogether. I think this is absolutely the most exciting news that we have.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
We will send this data back to Microsoft Dynamics NAV. So this allows you to always work with your data even when you're not having an internet connection.
It was clear that, Seaside started to show its age.
Weer zoveel mogelijk eventjes beneden. Downstairs vinger, please. Thank you.
And start out with a picture of good old Seaside. And I promise you this will be the last time that I'll start a presentation with a picture of Seaside, because we are moving everything to VS Code. You have made into Seaside, AL, and NAV into Visual Studio Code, and it has a huge marketplace where a lot of people have created extensions, themes, and other stuff. It's a huge community. It's open source.
You can get a few details. You can also get a list of all the new commands that it adds, all the new capabilities it adds to Visual Studio Code. Now, one of the most important ones being ALGO.
Getting this file to source control, because you might be developing against different servers, and then there is no point in sharing the connection details. And lastly, we have the settings JSON file, and here is where you store VS Code specific settings and any settings specific to AL language extension or any other extensions that you have installed. Format. And it's very simple. So actually, JSON contains of dictionaries of names and values, and it also can have a list. So
that we do a packaging and a compile step inside VS Code in the compiler locally. And when we have done that, wrapped it in a nice package, we send it over to the service. The service then unpacks it and compiles it again. Now actually create some binary artifacts. Which service should I connect to? And you have two options. You have the Microsoft Cloud Sandbox, which is a sandbox managed by Microsoft, and basically the other one could be named all other configurations, because if you are connecting to a server that you are managing, in the future, coming soon, we will have the ability to have many more modules that you can have reference. And longer term, imagine that we actually modularize the app and make it easier to pick. I only need finance. That's the only thing I depend on for my application. Modularization. It will take a while, but this is the direction we're heading in.
Calls are Pascal cased instead of uppercasing everything. So this is not enforced, but this is the convention that we'll be sticking to in our internal code, and we'll be presenting also coding guidelines externally. Table has fields and keys, and this is the table specific section, but it's all structured in the same way, and it all looks like a list, even though it's code. As you can see, the same pattern, but we don't follow the same approach only for objects, also for sub-elements. So here you can see a page field, And it also follows the same pattern that we have properties first and then the triggers. Another page designer for actions. They're not really that different, but they were very convenient. So we are aware that the approach changes now, so we took advantage of a lot of features in VS Code to make it very easy to get started. We added a structural keyword IntelliSense. That means that in every place in the object, so wherever you put your cursor and press Ctrl space, which triggers IntelliSense, you will always get the list of keywords that are possible in that context.
In the cloud, the resources are shared, which means that one tenant with a lot of traffic or maybe even poorly written code can disturb other tenants. Luckily, there was a huge overlap. We looked at our own code base and noticed that, more than 80% of the usages of .NET was actually coincidentally the same as the 80% most usages when we asked you. So very long. Lots of code to create this small sample. If we look at the similar code using new native methods, it's more condensed and way shorter. Lots of code, that was even worse to create that. If we look at how it looks now, a lot smaller, a lot nicer. So there's clearly some goodness in this. For the text builder, I created a small sample here, tried to build up a big string using the text type or using big text, and this one took 25 seconds. Slightly faster to use big text. I'm not sure why it's even that slow, but not impressive. With the text builder, it took 72 milliseconds. So huge performance gains.
Personally, of course, I never used the debugger because I write bugless code, but for the rest of you, actually it is very much like debuggers that you know from other products.
This is that you can do remote debugging. So you don't have to do any additional work to actually do remote debugging against a different machine. It doesn't have to be a local setup. It's all HTTP based and all based on the same protocol.
And we are working on the cross-platform implementation of the EL compiler we have running.
And custom report layouts. So we kept the way to obtain these things work the same as in V1. So most of the resources are achieved through PowerShell. To use both, but you won't be able to mix them in the same object. But this is the new way to use translations. It's very similar to the previous approach, but you can add more metadata to it in a nice structured way with IntelliSense support. Now we will generate an XLIF file. And what is an XLIF file? The XLIF file is the most commonly used translation format. It's an open standard. It has around, we could find at least 50 tools supporting the standard.
And then the Danish translation, force it new, and finish it. And now when I compile it, this translation file is included in my extension and it will then speak Danish.
We went out with a CAL open library, and it started as an initiative to give a way to replace .NET at a faster pace than we can produce new types in AL. And so far this has been quite successful. We've had close to 10 different contributions.
So previously we had like unique IDs for every category.
Okay, this is David Singleton. I'm asking a question about how does he think the market is going to change in the next couple of years? What's going to happen? People moving to the cloud, yes or no?
Well, I see it's no different to the DOS to Windows days. We had a small startup, it took a while, but eventually it became a big surge of people moving from the DOS product to the Windows product. We saw that suddenly happen and it grow. I think the same is going to happen here. People wait till the product is really ready. Azure isn't really ready for bigger customers, so you've got a lot of early adopters. But I see that we get a lot of people that for various reasons won't move for quite a bit of time. And by the time they're ready to move, it's going to be a decision, is it worth even staying with Navision, and probably a lot of those will move to other products that are on-premise. So I don't think everybody is. I think they'll get a large thing, but I believe that the Azure market, the cloud market, is going to be new business. It's going to be the new customers looking for a solution. I still see that a lot of the existing people aren't ready to move, and unless Microsoft can do something to really incentivize that, give us the few things we're missing, there's only minor things that will happen. If you look at RTC, a very small few reasons that people didn't migrate so fast. The core was pages just didn't do what forms. We didn't have a matrix form. You couldn't do F8. You couldn't quickly data entry. You couldn't use the keyboard. And even today, there's still no report designer native in Navision. You have to buy a third-party tool. Those two reasons are why it took so long to move to RTC. Now we're going to say the same with Azure. There'll be one or two or three minor things, but there'll be deal breakers that'll keep people away from Azure. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much.
It is fully event-driven, it is stateless, it is short-lived, and it requires theoretically zero administration. So, what does this all mean? It means that, in what way is this actually different from other things that we know from this as a service stack? Like, why is this different than software as a service or platform as a service? First, this is not platform. Platform as a service gives you facilities that you need to utilize to actually make something work. Azure itself is platform as a service. A full-blown development environment, such as Visual Studio, for example. And finally, we have this open source platform that Azure Functions are, which means that they are completely open for anybody else to use, for you to use, for you to contribute if you want. So here is the GitHub repository where Microsoft is actually maintaining the entire platform. We have applications, so all of the functions are hosted in applications, but those applications are not projects or source code applications the way that you are familiar with when you develop stuff. We use database deployment, which is kind of a simpler way. It doesn't require you to actually have physical access to the server. But then you have another problem. You have a problem with dependencies. In extensions v2, there is no more .NET Intro. If we talk AL language, there is no more .NET Intro. So, not only is a very painful process to maintain our .NET assemblies, we now have a very burning reason why we would not want to use them anymore. That's just because AL language doesn't support them yet. With versions and everything. When you have an Azure function, you've seen that I've changed the same Azure function a couple of times. I didn't need to restart anything, I didn't need to stop, I didn't need to deploy anything new. I just changed URL. And sometimes, depending on how you write your application, you may not even need to do that. So it's all up to you. So Azure functions are really a very good replacement for that part of the .NET stack, which is not yet replaced by Microsoft. All of these languages, and Microsoft is adding more and more language support to Azure functions. You can combine them, you can have applications which combine multiple languages. But do they really perform the same? So I'm kind of a JavaScript guy. I absolutely love JavaScript. And people tell me JavaScript is not a real language, it is interpreted, it is slow, you should not be using it, you should use TypeScript, whatever. That's shirts for questions, but questions have to be smart. So, question over there. You're next. Everybody live over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a short question. Can we use, can we call these Azure functions from CL?
Yes, you can. So you will just have to use .NET Interop, the guy you're trying to replace.
Sooner or later, the shit will hit the fan anyway. And the place where the shit hits the fan is the SQL Server. We had these three major areas of performance. There was one thing was platform and stuff like this. The other thing was blocking and stuff like this. And the major, or the most important area where we have lots of problems and also lots of resolutions, this is this vast area of query strategies, where it's about communication between NAV and SQL Server. And our session today is also within this context of query strategy. In this session, we have actually two parts. The first part is Jasminka will dig into this left-hand side, the seaside world, what you can do about here.
Tells you how much work your system will have to do to process the data set given your code. So it measures how effective or ineffective your code is. And that is 1 million records. The logarithmic, the index seek that we do has only now only costs 14 operations, so has only grown a little. While as index scan now takes million operations. Worse algorithms will take up to billion and more, depends on your algorithm complexity. So, and we have things going on CR side, and then on server side, and then on SQL side, but and some fixed transaction cost. But for the simplicity, let's combine these complexities into one common complexity. So whatever complexity is going to happen on SQL side and whatever happens on server side, combine it into a joint complexity, and when writing your code, this means minimize server round trips. The fewer the round trips, the better the performance. The familiar stuff that you've always probably known. Indented loops with naturally queries. Queries execute one round trip. So you save, that's the constant green belt. So you save your system a lot of work and a lot of stress by replacing the round trips, successive round trips, with one effective query. Now queries don't cache too, so if you're going to do the replacement, do it somewhere where you know the code won't be repeated within one process excessively, because you want to also benefit. So, for example, if you do put some loop into a fact box and that fact box ends up on a list, that's going to be kind of refreshed, read for each record on the list. That will have some implications, because you have a fact box that goes for every record, and then within that you have your loop on the fact box. This is just an example, but then I think they still cause a lot of discussion in the channel for some reason. There is still lots of confusion. It's really quite simple. They are well documented. That documentation stands. So what is written is true. This is what they do and how they should be used. So whatever you do, you have to keep in mind, unless you are working with scenario where it's of crucial importance to get a reply to some statement you sent within 10th of a millisecond. It won't matter much what you use of these. Find is quick, so is find, set, so is find, first, so is find, last. They are all one round trip, except find, that's two. They're all the green belt, they're all the constant complexity. They do not go with input data. Your problem, whatever it is, will likely not be here. So it's the complexity of the code we write. It's those indented loops, the excessive round trips that cause the issue. It's hardly ever one of these.
Scenario is that I have to only read one page per index level. So in this case, that would be 3 reads when seeking through the index. Scanning, in this case, even means already 4 indexes. So what does that mean so far? You have to have the right indexes to support the where clauses, to support the filtering. This is the number one, having the right index. Set current key is not mandatory. But if you have a key you can use, then it's a good idea to use it, because you make life easier for SQL Server. Then here I'm executing a procedure sp help index, just to display all the available indexes in this table from Management Studio. So you know I'm not cheating, so it's still there, clustered index, and again your attention please to this one, $1, GL account number, posting date. Only 3 million pencils. This is the width of this clustered index. Nonetheless, it's still just 3 levels deep. I have just one root node, and out of this root node there's 200 branches growing out, addressing the next level, and so on. This is not even a SQL problem. This is something you also see in SAP and Oracle. In Azure, you have some feature like auto-indexing. We were discussing this. We're not sure which algorithms are behind this, but obviously there is a kind of auto-indexing feature in Azure. We have to check it out. So, maybe you also. So I'm blinded, so I don't know who I hit. So. You only need this in a lower level if you have your own SQL code that uses all the syntax. But for NAV, this does not apply. Navision always requires the server level. It's just because on the Kronos demo database is on 2008 configured, and everyone forgets to increase it.
You do processing in tab tables and then just send output, basically finished output to. Sounds like a good idea, yeah, but that is optimizing data set in a way, that the resulting is optimized data set. Well, it's a great suggestion. I don't know why nobody wrote it. I don't know why nobody put example like that, but whatever will optimize your data set is the correct solution.
Yeah.
Powerhouse in Belgium. It's beautiful, blonde, but really rich and fierce. So enjoy.
What is Peter? Oh, yeah.
Hi sir, can I help you?
Yeah. Can I have a little bit of beer?
Meat is not too strong, not too spicy, I suppose.
They're always nice on Twitter, so
I tried big community.
Yes, I must say.
I'm not good on C# and studio stuff, but I can Google really good. Count me out. Oh, you haven't got on it? Yeah, three, and smile. Hey.
For you.
So what is VS Code? A lightweight tool. VS is not Visual Studio. Yes, it's Visual Studio, but more like the family name Visual Studio. Basically, this is a lightweight tool. Why Visual Studio? Definitely it's not. Multi-platform. You can do OS development or development on Mac OS, which you might have seen yesterday, I think, in the session. You will have a directory, which is called workspace, and everything in that directory is your project, and basically your app that you will be creating. You have the command palette, you can do lots of configurations, source control integration, debugger, everything that you expect from a development tool. And we'll start with source control integration. Out of the box, you have source control integration, and you all know what that is, right? Right? Only a few people know what source control integration is. Okay, let me explain you a little bit. You need to know who changed what, when, and why. If you not install Git support, then, yeah, well, there's nothing to invoke. So it's just that it's not that you install VS Code that you can just use Git. No, you need to install some more, which is basically with this URL, download it, install it, press next, 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 quite a lot of nexts. Cloud part, where everything is basically synced. You have to clone. You can clone down to your own machine, and so on. Makes it the entire command being searchable for comments to actually execute something, to give it a job, like merge or push or sync or whatever. Code unit in this case is just some notification. It opens the file and can start developing.
Now the base app is still developed using C#, but the goal is definitely to move everything to the new language, to AL, only using VS Code.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The next session will start in a few minutes.
Probably sometimes I'll outgrow the venue, but you need to run an application or to run a service. So it's the minimum OS that you need, the minimum binaries, libraries, and the application itself, which allows you to do something like a very, very small image that only exactly contains what you need to run your service, to run your application. For NAV, it's a rather large one, because NAV depends on .NET and a lot of different additional things, but the idea is to bring everything together that you need and include nothing that you don't need, to have as close as possible to the minimum image. It means you get a lot tighter packing of your applications and the services that you want to run. But what you can do is something that's a volume. I think they were also shown in the keynote, and what that basically does, it tells the Docker environment that I have that folder on my host and I want to reuse it as that folder in my container. So in my example, I'm using cdata container temp, and that should be mapped to ctemp in my container.
Documentation will be on MSDN and on blogs. I have posted a number of blogs on trying to document all these things.
Change seminar price on seminar registration with register lines, so they need to be updated. And or actually these shouldn't be updated, and the unregistered lines. It's exactly the same as normal code. The only thing is if you run the whole, do the whole execution.
So it's a verification.
And you have different scenarios. The thing is that you cannot create a test, let's say a generic test.
Control as things go off the rails really quickly, and this is why we need source code management. Because you know when you save this object, it compiled, and then somebody did something else somewhere else, your object is still compiled, but does your object compile now that somebody changed something somewhere else in the system? You don't know. So, and I think to create an automated world, we need to start with the source code management system. Of course, the developers can just load the bills and use them, or they can update the database with whatever's in source code management, whatever way is the fastest for what they're doing today. So how are we going to do this? What tools have we elected to use? We have a selection of tools here. In our case, we're using Visual Studio Team Services. I mean, it's Microsoft. I mean, we've got to use Microsoft. Work as efficiently as possible, and who's better to do that than the development team? If you let them focus on sprints and you clearly define, and I don't know how much you know about Scrum and Agile, but I just want to say, if you don't know anything about it, you need to start reading up on it. It's not that this is the only way that things are going to work, but it has been proven to be extremely effective.
And it's not a big deal because most of the time they end up on our field. So there's rollback. It's a very small thing that is great to fix it.
You need to mix a table connection, which is the same setup as for CRM, which enables you to look up in the graph through this table. And actually already now you can use this table to look up and see data in the Microsoft graph. If you need some more special, more complex behavior, you can use events in our integration record sync, where you can synchronize to say you need 5 tables to be updated, or you need complex.
Thank you for supporting the events. I want to thank Microsoft. Thank you for sending your developers and people from the development team to Antwerp. I want to thank the speakers. Thank you for your time investment and sharing your knowledge. And then finally, I want to thank you, all the participants, for coming always in these great numbers to Antwerp.
Lastly, there is Wi-Fi both in the expo area and in the session rooms.
There seems to be a correlation between the number of days spent on vacation and the amount of money used.